In our last lecture, we learned that Israel was another name for Jacob. We also discussed the family of Jacob, the 12 sons of Jacob, and pointed to the fact that in order to get a purchase on this figure of Jacob, the best way to do that is to attend to the story about he and his family. This story, sometimes known as the Joseph story, is found in the last 14 chapters of the book of Genesis, Genesis chapters 37 through 50. And to that story we should now turn, and let's begin with the very beginning of that story, chapter 37, verse 1. Jacob dwelt in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a lad with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought an ill report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long robe with sleeves. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. The story begins with a detail that the reader might take as insignificant, but I'd like to suggest it is of the utmost significance. That is, Joseph is introduced in this story as a shepherd. This is typical of biblical stories, and indeed stories from the ancient Near East, about individuals who are bound to become leaders. The reason for that is that the shepherd was an image of royalty in the ancient Near East. One can find numerous artistic depictions from classical Mesopotamia that portray the king as a shepherd shepherding his flock. One thinks as well of the image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd from the New Testament, or perhaps the most important or most famous psalm in the biblical collection of psalms, Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." All of these texts underscore the significance of this vocation, and it's not by chance that Joseph, when he's introduced in the book of Genesis, is introduced as a shepherd. We as readers know that Joseph is destined for great significance. One excellent parallel to the beginning of the Joseph story is the story about the beginning of King David's life. In 1 Samuel 15, we read about David's predecessor, Saul, being rejected by the prophet Samuel. At the beginning of chapter 16 of 1 Samuel, the prophet Samuel is commanded by God to go to the city of Bethlehem to find Israel's next king. And to that story, let us now turn. Once Samuel has arrived in Bethlehem, he summons Jesse and his sons to come and see him. And the text reads, "When they came," that is Jesse and his sons, "Samuel looked on Eliab and thought, 'Surely the Lord's anointed is before him.' But the Lord said to Samuel, 'Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart.' Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, 'Neither has the Lord chosen this one.' Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, 'Neither has the Lord chosen this one.' And Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, 'The Lord has not chosen these.' Then in complete surprise, Samuel turns to Jesse and says, 'Are these all of your sons?' And Jesse then replies, quote, 'There remains yet the youngest.'" Remember Joseph, one of the youngest of Jacob's sons. "But behold, he is keeping the sheep.' And Samuel said to Jesse, 'Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he comes here.' And he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. And the Lord said, 'Arise, anoint him, for this is he.' Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. We should note two things about this story. First of all, David, just like Joseph, was not the firstborn son of his father, but indeed a latter-born son. So the choosing of David over all of his siblings comes as something of a surprise, certainly like the surprise of the selection of Joseph in the Joseph story. The second thing to be noticed in this story is that when David is chosen, he is a shepherd. And again, in that respect, he reflects very closely the figure of Joseph, in which, at the beginning of his story, he too is depicted as a shepherd. The relationship of shepherd to kingship, or shepherd to rulership, is brought out very nicely in Psalm 78, a psalm that speaks to David's character. And it reads, "He," that is God, "chose David his servant and took him from the sheepfolds, from tending the ewes that he had brought him, to be the shepherd of Jacob his people, of Israel his inheritance." This royal image of the shepherd, as we've already noted, was common in the ancient world and will reappear in the New Testament as a characterization of Jesus.